what we're going to do is walk through the download and setup of the VirtualBox and the formal criteria for the solution assignment. The solution assignment document is right here. And so basically it says, what you need to do to create the VM from the download after you've installed VirtualBox. And you'll notice that it talks about this first step here. So if you follow Appendix A of your textbook, right? And some of you are going to say, well, I don't have the textbook yet. One reason we're embedding this approach to the detail instead of spelling it out verbatim with screenshots, because we're trying to encourage you to invest in the textbook, right? So it's going to have guidance about checking the box to reinitialize the MAC address of all network cards. It's not shown on screen in the latest version of VirtualBox. Instead, use the pull-down option to select the generate new option lowest in the order shown. We'll see what that means in a minute. We're going to take a screenshot as it's being imported, showing the progress bar. So one of the screenshots you're going to capture is the import progress as it's playing out. You want to be ready to do that. So yeah, the rest of this is all right here. Let's take this a step at a time. So our first, any questions about what we've shared from the assignment document in section 1 so far?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and download the image. And I'm going to select PGBook VM.ova and do download. Once again, I'm going to add your UVI credentials to your student ID and your UVI credentials to the sharing option so that you can download this. You see it's going to take a few minutes to download. And I do have another copy in my system.
Dr. Kempa?
Yes.
So, like, when you add our emails, will we have to go into like my campus and download it, or would the link be in like Blackboard?
I'm glad you asked that. So when I add your credentials, you'll probably get a link that says, hey, you've been added to sharing of this resource. And what you'll end up doing is clicking on the link, and it'll take you right to OneDrive, and it might prompt you for a login, but you'll use your UVI email address, and then you'll see the My Campus login where you put in your student ID. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
If you haven't installed VirtualBox already, basically from a Google prompt, if you just search for VirtualBox downloads, virtualbox.org is the native site. You might get other results. If you do, it's not valid. But you're going to go to Downloads, Oracle, VM, VirtualBox. When you get to this screen, you're going to find that these other resources have been removed because the versions have updated since then. If you have a Mac, you're going to go to the OS X hosts option and download the VirtualBox 6.1.12. If you're doing Windows, you're going to download the Windows host 6.1.12. You may already have VirtualBox loaded, and if you do, what you're going to want to do is start it. And as it starts, you'll want to see what version it is. Usually it'll pop up and say there's a new version if you have an old version. Every other month or so, they'll come out with a new version. So you can get it fresh from the website at virtualbox.org, downloads, and get the latest version. If you have the old version, it's going to ask you, it's going to prompt you and say, hey, don't you want this? I'm going to say okay and close my VirtualBox, and then download the new version from the website or click the link. And that usually goes a lot faster than our OneDrive download for the Blackboard site or UVI Office 365 site. It's not a very large download, so in contrast to the virtual machine appliance that's 6.6 gigabytes large, this is only 103 megs. And so when that's finished downloading, you'll go to your downloads folder and you'll want to select it and then right click it and run as administrator. At that point, it'll ask you if you want to install. You say yes. So I was just downloading an extra copy of that. I'll answer next. I'll select the defaults and say next. And then next. It'll say, hey, your network interfaces will be altered as you're installing this. That means that your screen may flicker or your internet service may be disrupted for a moment, but that's usually just a moment. You say yes, and then install. Now, while that's loading, I thought I would share with you how important it is to intentionally select where you want your virtual machine stored. So this is something that dramatically affects performance, and it bites some people. So we get some very frustrated folks that went through the process to optimize their personal technology. They're all excited to do this. And there's a setting inside VirtualBox that you should change. Some of you like to use the cloud. All right, so I'm going to click Finish. It's going to start VirtualBox afterwards. I'm going to accept that. And here's my VirtualBox. So unless you have a previous virtual machine set up, and again, some of you do have VirtualBox and have other virtual machines, you're going to want to go to the Preferences option off the File menu before you do anything to import the appliance. This is really important. You'll notice that it says the default machine folder. You want to make sure that this is not included in your OneDrive cloud. And in fact, I recommend that you create a separate folder on your PC in your C drive, and you can put it inside a temp folder, or you can have a separate one, call it VHD or VM. So VHD stands for virtual hard disk, and that's a component of virtual machines. But let's pretend that we have a temp folder on our C drive, and if you don't have a temp folder on your C drive, it's good to create one. I did the other day for another class to demonstrate something we're doing in computer architecture, but inside the temp folder, I'm going to include a new folder. So I right-click the white space, creating a new folder called VM, right? That's not a part of my documents, or it's not a part of my user profile for my account. The default setting that VirtualBox uses is terrible if you're using the cloud. If you're using OneDrive to store your documents so that they're always in the cloud, it means that you're loading 6 gigabytes. When you're creating the virtual machine, it's going to unpack 6.6 gigabytes. It's going to expand to about 20 or 30 gigabytes, and it's doing all of that across the internet in your OneDrive in the cloud. It's terrible, okay? So, so you're going to want to create a VM folder off of the C drive or in a temp folder off the C drive. And here you see I have if I go into this, the path for this, if I click in the white space here, is C:\temp\VM. So I have a folder called temp off my C drive and a separate folder in there called VM. This is what I'm going to select for my location. I'm going to choose other and then go to this PC, and I'm going to go into C drive temp and my virtual machine. And now you see C:\temp\VM. And that's where I'm storing my virtual machine. I'm not just accepting the defaults, because that gets messy. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. And at this point, let's see where we are with our download. Okay, so I have my appliance downloaded from my UVI website. So if I look in downloads now, I have a file that looks like this. If I enlarge the icon, it'll say PGBook VM OVA, and it'll say OVA right here. So once again, I'm going to import this file. So I'll point to the downloads folder and choose this file. And then I'm going to follow along with the directions about the MAC address right here to avoid an error. We'll also talk about the acceleration error not being available, and that's so the last time we did this, it was a different version of VirtualBox, and I want to encourage you to be a little patient with yourself. If you click through what we're showing you now and you do what I'm about to share with you, and then your result is different. It could be you have a different version of VirtualBox and you didn't update your VirtualBox, or it could be that my assignment document was true for a previous version of VirtualBox. And if that's the case, we'll catch it today while we're doing this, and I'll update the how-to. Why am I telling you this? If that's the case, new versions of VirtualBox happen all the time, and sometimes they put out a new version, and then there's a bug, and they have to put out a new version to fix the other new version, and that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. So if you run into a snag while you're setting up, don't hesitate to send me an email. Send me a screenshot of the error, and we'll take it from there. You could be the first person to encounter a new update to the version that was buggy, and 2 or 3 other students were okay, and now you're getting an error because there was a fix. And in cases like that, when you share and you reach out to me, I will almost always post additional credit in a column called additional credit in your gradebook, because hey, there was an issue and you shared it with me, and now I can post a change and send an updated solution document to the rest of the class, and that keeps 10 other people from having the same problem. So I just thought I would mention that while we're in here. So the first thing I'm going to do to begin, are there any questions at this point before we start the process of importing the VirtualBox?
No.
No, I'm good.
Okay. And I noticed that we did have another student join us in progress, and when we're finished with the recording, if you could just hang on and then tell me so I can make sure. I took screenshots of the list and I just want to make sure you're in there. All right, so here we go. You're going to select the file menu, and right below the preferences where you changed your VirtualBox storage location, you're going to choose import appliance, and we're going to click the folder option and go to our C drive and select our temp folder and our VM folder. No, I'm sorry. That's where we're going to store that's where the virtual machine is going to be created. We're going to go to downloads, my bad, and you'll see that PGBook VM.ova appears in your list. And at that point, let's see here. Got to get rid of this floating console so we can all see. I'm going to hit next. And it's got this business down here. So that's the reference we're talking about. In all the other default settings are good. You can leave all of this unchanged. But the assignment document is referring to the MAC address, and that's a network setting. And what we want to do is make sure that the pull-down option says generate new. Now, why is that important? The MAC address is a unique network identity. You don't want multiple copies of the same network hardware out on a network operating at the same time, or things can go boom. So I'm back in here, and I'm going to select generate new MAC addresses for all network adapters. So everybody got that? Needs to say generate new MAC addresses for all network adapters. You see where the machine base folder is. Verify the machine base folder to be the local hard drive and not the cloud. If you see documents or you see virtual machines and a user profile and there's a long path there, bad, bad, bad. You're going to import. Can we ask somebody to mute their microphone, please? Okay, so if you did the optimization of your personal technology, what you're going to find is that this import process moves along pretty quickly. If you have not done the optimization of your personal technology, it's going to take a lot longer. It could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's trying to find a way to unpack 20 gigabytes of disk space. And because the disk optimization and defragmentation was not performed, it's writing little chunks of 20 to 30 gigabytes all over your hard disk. And when you open the thing, it's going to be slow. And everything else on your system is going to be slow. So a good litmus test to see whether or not the personal technology preps you did were correct, you should see just a few minutes listed. I also have a solid state hard drive, and that tends to work faster with system RAM, and a traditional hard drive in a laptop is not quite as fast. If you see anything that's running into the 20, 30-minute, hour-long range, you should probably click the X and cancel out and go back and then redo or check to make sure you got all the steps for your personal tech optimization. Are there any questions about what we've covered to this point? Any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, this is a little tedious. I can open the class up to ask, has anybody encountered any unusual issues while you're trying to work the disk cleanup, the updates for Windows, the optimization, and so on?
I have in
when
the
I
past
did,
with a previous computer. You can go ahead first.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
When I did this cleanup, I only had like 2 gigabytes remaining, so I don't think that's enough. So I was wondering if I can use like a jump drive or something, or it wouldn't work that way.
Actually, you can use a jump drive. It's a little slower, and the trick is whether or not the USB port on your laptop is USB 3.0 capable. So after we clear this session and we're finished with the setup, all right. So once you're finished, it'll show PGBook VM _1, or it may show _0 or 2, depending on whether or not you've installed this thing on your system before. But you'll notice that it's an older version of Ubuntu. And what am I saying? There's a version of Linux, it's another type of operating system that the virtual machine uses, and here's something very important to understand. The first time that you run the virtual machine, all right, so you may get an error and you have to make a change. Everybody's hardware differs. Your own particular graphics card is a great example. Your graphics display card we could change it to a different type or change the memory size and it'll work just fine. But if you run it to start it and there's an issue, you should basically get a screenshot and send it to me, and we can sort through that. The other thing that's going to happen too is that your network may be configured to connect to the internet right away. And when you start your virtual machine, it's going to say, hey, there's a lot of updates. And you don't want to change anything. You don't want it to update. You don't want it to run updates. It works right out of the box. If you run updates from the internet, it's going to try to load version 14 and then version 16 and then version 18. And then some of the applications are not going to work with the newer versions of Ubuntu. So I just wanted to cue you to that dynamic of the virtual machine. The other thing that I want you to notice too is that when you look in your C drive and you look in your VM, if you check the folder for this virtual machine, okay, in my case, it opened up to 15 gigabytes. So 6 gigabytes, 6.6 gigabytes expanded to 14.5 gigabytes. And what you want to do is delete the original download. You can delete this once you know that your virtual machine is running correctly. The best way to do that is to just power it on, right? So we're going to power it on and see if we had an error. But I wanted to cue you to the fact that, okay, so it says you have the auto capture keyboard turned on. I'm going to close this message. And it says mouse pointer integration. I'm going to close that message. And you're going to get a black screen for a while. Yeah, and it's going to ask you to type in a password. And you have to have the book to know the password. Yeah, I'm not making this up. Once again, this solution is designed to encourage you to purchase the textbook. And so rather than just telling you the password, I'm hoping that each of you are smiling because you went out and you sprung for a few dollars to get the rental on the textbook online, which is only a couple of bucks. And in Appendix A, it tells you the password. In order to complete the solution, you put in the password from Appendix A, you log in, and then you take a screenshot of the opening screen, and you're done. And remember, if you're connected to the internet and you see a prompt inside that window, oh, hey, you have lots of updates. I know you did this to prep your personal technology, but don't do this with your virtual machine. Okay, so that concludes our review of your setup for solution, module 1 solution. Are there any questions at this time? Any questions?
So is it simpler on Mac
Is it simpler on Macs?
to download all of this?
Actually, it's very much the same once you get inside VirtualBox. So what you should see inside the Mac should work the same way. And for the network adapter, just be sure that when you import, you select that option to generate a new Mac. When it's talking about generate a new Mac, it's talking about the network media access control identity. It's not talking about your MacBook. It's not generating a new Mac inside your Mac. The two terms are completely different in terms of context, but everything else should be the same, and it should be simpler in a Mac. When you work on a Mac to do this, you're dropping the icon for VirtualBox onto the applications icon. You've installed applications in your Mac before, yes?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You double click, it'll prompt you to drag something somewhere and you do it, or it'll prompt you to double click on something and it'll do it. And then when you open up the VirtualBox Manager, if you have an Apple Cloud set up to store all of your documents, I'm sure you don't want 15 gigabytes of iCloud taken up. That would be pricey. That would be expensive, right? So again, you want to create a directory or a folder. You could put it on your desktop. You could create a folder on your desktop that says VM, and then just point the preferences to the folder on your desktop in the Mac. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.